This is the Spokane Soccer Show, and I am your Zephyr FC historian and host, Benji Wade. On today's show, the Super League Soccer Show takeover officially begins. I'm joined by my friend and professional soccer player, Abby Carchio. Abby and I are going to introduce you to the first 22 players signed by Zephyr FC. It's going to be the first ever two-part episode of the show, and you are listening to Part 1, Midfielders and Defenders. 8 midfielders, 6 defenders. That's it. That's the intro. But before I get started, I need to give a special shout out to my friend, Deanna Hanley, President and CEO of Spokane City Credit Union, for providing additional support to the Spokane Soccer Show so that we could bring this content to your eyes and ears, folks. Deanna was the first and literally only phone call I made when the idea of doing a Super League Soccer Show takeover started to take shape, and she said yes without hesitation. So, thank you, Deanna. Thank you, Spokane City Credit Union. Now, on with the show. Okay, Abby Carchio, my friend, we are here to talk about 22. No, we're going to do 14 first. 14 of Zephyr FC's first ever player signings. It's a lot of ground to cover. Today we're going to do midfielders and defenders that have been signed so far. That's 14 by my count. I think 8 midfielders and 6 defenders. I can't wait to get stuck in, as the English like to say. Hi, Abby. How are you?
I'm doing so well, Benji. So excited to, again, get stuck in on these players. I'm so thrilled. And it's honestly like we're putting the pieces together to create this awesome Zephyr puzzle.
It is. It's like reading a puzzle. And it's also like a little bit like Christmas. I've been texting you all day, expressing my enthusiasm for this endeavor. I will introduce the player, talk about their amateur experience, where they grew up, their professional experience. Abby's going to be giving some insights about all these pros, some of whom are entering their first professional experiences of their career, some of whom have bounced around to a few clubs already. So, okay, let's start with the first ever signing for Spokane Zephyr FC, Marley Canales, a 26-year-old, 5'4" midfielder. She was, again, the first player ever signed. She grew up in San Diego. Here's her amateur experience. Marley played club soccer for San Diego Surf. Marley was the 2014-2015 California Gatorade Player of the Year finalist. She was recruited to play for UCLA, where she played all 4 years of her college and had 79 appearances, 11 goals, and 15 assists in like 5,600 minutes of play. She was a 3-time All Pac-12 player and played U.S. youth national team soccer across all levels. And that's the summary of Marley's amateur experience. Abby, tell us about Marley as a professional soccer player thus far in her career.
Starting off with a really experienced player collegiately, Benji, and she also transcends that into a professional career. So she was drafted in the 2022 our favorite thing, the NWSL draft, to the Reign. She was drafted in the 4th round, 47th overall. She ended up having 10 appearances with the Reign, as it was called back in the day. And then she went on into a training environment with the San Diego Wave, where she had Alex Morgan, just a small name there as a teammate, as a target forward. So definitely an experienced player collegiately and then also professionally.
Here's the thing about Marley that kind of surprised both of us. We can't find any of her play. There's nothing on YouTube. Like, she only made 10 appearances for, I think they were the OL Reign back in the day when she played for them before Seattle took the name back, thank goodness.
Yeah.
So we don't really have any ability to look at what she looks like as a player, do we?
No, it was very minuscule. I think we saw some of her U20 national team experience, maybe scoring a goal, but bar that and a few interviews, there's really nothing in terms of her style of play, which definitely gave us a tough read. But I think in general, she comes highly touted as a leader, obviously being in that experience quite often. And then, like I said, Alex Morgan as a teammate, she's used to playing and connecting with a very pacey front line or pacey 9. And I think we have that in the Zephyr squad.
The only thing I know now, and I did get a chance to see because she was one of the players. It's funny because Zephyr have 2 players that were signed, and immediately I found some notes that they were going to be playing in the TST, the 7-versus-7 tournament. Marley played with Angel City FC. I didn't actually get to see her play much. This was like happening at the height of some of the busier parts of the schedule for Spokane Velocity and so forth. So I didn't really get to watch a ton of the 7-versus-7 TST tournament, but I did see that she was playing with Angel City. Got to see like probably 20 or 30 minutes of her play, but it's a very different format. It's hard to assess like what even good soccer looks like in that tournament. So yeah, it's super surprising to me that of all these players not being able to find video of what their play looks like other than like 30 to 40 second clips here and there. And like you said, some interviews. So I do have a question for you, Abby. I look at her production in college, 79 appearances, 11 goals, 15 assists, and like 5,600 minutes. Played for UCLA, which is that's a powerhouse college soccer team, men and women, right? But I think especially women. Tell me a little bit about what you can glean from her college experience, put together with the fact that she was drafted in the 4th round. Like, what is your kind of expectation of the pedigree of her as a player?
Yeah, like I said before, I think she's existed in these very highly sought after, highly respected environments. And so she's used to pressure. And clearly by her statistics in college, she's performed in that pressure environment, which is exactly what I would like to see here for her in this season. I'm never bullish on looking at a player's college experience in terms of minutes, just because there are different subbing rules regarding that.
Okay.
But obviously, in terms of her goals and assists statistics, by those metrics, she produces. And that's what you need in a midfield, especially in a new league. And I'll go back to that throughout this podcast.
That's a really good point about the substitution and rotation thing, because it doesn't give you the most complete picture of a player's durability if they've rotated a lot and to get those minutes. Yeah, the only other thing I had was, what do we expect from a position and role? Like, we both, I think, from the way that she has been shown in some of the early media appearances for Zephyr FC, that she's going to have probably some type of leadership role is what we both expect. Do you have the same impulse on that?
Yeah, I think she will, in terms just like, and we're going to do a lot of guesswork here, but I do think in terms of media stuff, she would be looked at as one of those leaders and probably expressing her vocality throughout. In terms of position, this whole midfield category, Benji, is going to be so difficult for me because, again, there are 3 spots. We don't know if they're playing 2 6s, 2 10s, a proper 6, 8, 10. So for me, Marley's probably going to be playing either the 8 or 10, just because she can connect. And I think that's essential for 10. I really would put her there. I would push her up higher on the pitch.
It's funny that you say that, because I expected that as well. And I reached out to her, as I tend to do. I DM'd her early on when she was signing. I just asked, assumed, like, where are you most comfortable in midfield? Because I couldn't quite tell from any of the research we were doing on this. And she said more of a 6 or an 8, but that she could play anywhere across midfield. So maybe it's one of those, you're a very productive attacking player in college, but maybe that part of her game didn't translate as much as a professional. Who knows?
Yeah, I can speak to that a bit. I was a 10 in college and worked my way back, ended up playing the 8 and then the 6. And so it totally makes sense in my mind. It just, I think it's also going to have a lot to do with the other personalities on the squad, and especially within the midfield, to see where these players fall. No, I would just like her to post her highlight tape to YouTube for us.
It's going to come up a lot. This is going to be one of these things we're just going to be saying to these young players, get your mixtapes going. They're super valuable. Okay, Abby, moving along. Our next player is Wayny Balata, 23-year-old, 5'8" midfielder. Wayny grew up in Montreal, Quebec. She was juggling basketball and soccer as a kid. I don't blame her. I mean, that's the 2 best sports in the world. If I didn't have a podcast about soccer, I would probably have a podcast about basketball, because I love basketball, but that's a topic for another day. She had 11 caps as a youth player for the Canadian national team. She was recruited to play for Southern Methodist University, where she made 56 appearances, scored 16 goals, bagged 6 assists. She was a team captain as a senior. That's what I have on Wayny as through her amateur level experience. Abby, what can you tell me? We do have tape. We have video of Wayny as a player. Tell me what you saw. What do you think of Wayny Balata? What did you see?
Yeah, so obviously we don't have the professional experience, but we do have this coveted film, which I thought we got a really good taste of what we're going to see. First things first, very athletic build. Did well collegiately because of that, and I think it's going to bode well for her in this league. I think what stood out to me is her finishing ability. I thought she demonstrated a really high soccer IQ in terms of when she finished with finesse, when she finished with power. I mean, to be finishing with a slot shot outside or just on the 18, that shows some solid IQ for me. I also think you saw a lot of her arriving late into the box and finishing home. I think that's really bodes well for, a trailing 10 or a pocket 8.
Yeah, I have pretty similar notes. Her goals that were in her highlights showed like a little bit of everything. Poise when she has time on the ball, making back post runs, volleys, headers. She had a little bit of everything, and she chipped a keeper in one of the goals that I saw. She can poach too. She just genuinely has a nose for scoring goals. I would also, I'm curious if you feel the same way, because I totally agree with your notes. Like, just calm finisher, and she'll use power when she thinks that's required, but she's definitely got some touch. I would also very much fancy her to take a PK. Do you feel that way?
In college? Absolutely.
Okay.
I do think like we're going to see a trend, like the jump to college, and it's not talked about a lot. The jump from college to professional football is big, and the pressure situation might be a bit different. And so she wouldn't be my first choice based on the other players on this roster. But I would love to see her grow into it,
I mean, the other thing I really liked is great footwork, body position. She opens up and reads the game well. She'll find a pass, technically pretty solid. She can also get defenders to lean and commit. And once that happens, she can burn them. She's got great touch as a passer. Saw a lot of weighted passes in her bag. So I expect her to reward runners. If people on her team make runs, she'll see them. Can use her height and play tall and physical as well. The only thing that probably made me wonder a little bit is I saw some injury history that's like, that's always something to keep an eye on. But I'm so glad you brought this up, Abby. We talked about it with our friend Sydney on our last podcast, the difference between college soccer and professional soccer. I've gotten to see it from some of these players. You've gotten to experience it, right? Even in some of the video, some of these players look quite different when they're in college versus when they're professionals. So what do you think about as far as position and role? What are you seeing?
Yeah, like I mentioned before, I think her X factor in the professional game is going to be composure in terms of her finishing. And I think that the best spot for that is a trailing 10. So in a 2-10 system, one that sits a little bit deeper and then arrives late. Or if they play a standard 6-8-10 role, I think potentially she could be the 8 bar, her fitness being up to standard. Again, her X factor for me is in the finishing game. So if you can get her closer to the final third earlier, that's best for me. I'm just curious how she's going to, some of the other things that you mentioned, her passing ability, her composure in terms of being on the ball, how that's going to translate with an uptick in speed of play.
Seems very versatile, but she's also a player that, for all the reasons you just outlined so well, like, she's a player you want her in a position where she can create threat both as a passer and a finisher. Even on set pieces, I thought a little bit on some of her tape that she'll make that back post run and use her physicality. For any of our listeners, think Ahmed Longmire, back post, looping headers, that kind of thing. So
how these kids are translating, or how these kids are transitioning from college to the professional game.
Next up, Taylor Aylmer. I hope I'm saying your name correctly, Taylor. 25-year-old, 5'7" midfielder. She grew up in Garnerville, which is like a hamlet, they call it, in Rockland County, New York. Her amateur experience includes playing ECNL ball for a club called World Class FC. She was recruited to play for Rutgers University, where she made 62 appearances, scored 2 goals, had 14 assists, and was a team captain as a junior and a senior. She made all Big Ten third team, all regional second team as a senior. And she does have some professional experience. So what have you learned about her as a pro, Abby?
This is a player I am so excited to talk about because she has a lot of experience in an unorthodox path to Zephyr FC. So in 2021, she was on a national team replacement contract with Gotham. Then she signed with Spirit, where she played 32 matches. She had 32 appearances, which is kind of rare, I would say, coming from a national team replacement contract. After that, she went in 2023 over to Finland, played for a club called Åland, where she played 12 games before signing for Zephyr FC. And so here you have a player that's vastly different than the one we just talked about in terms of her professional experience in both domestic league and international league.
She threw her name in the hat to be drafted in the 2020 draft, but wasn't drafted. Got a national team replacement contract for Gotham, but then ended up with her 32 appearances were for Washington Spirit. So tell us about the national team replacement contract. What is that?
Yeah, so this type of contract is essentially when our national team players, so either US or other internationals, have these major tournaments, World Cups, Olympics, for instance, and maybe some of the smaller ones, Gold Cup, AFCON. And these clubs are allowed to temporarily sign other players to replace those national team players. And so it's a short-term contract, usually a month, maybe 2 months. From there, you can be signed on full-time, but oftentimes it's just a 1-month situation and then you become a training player. And so for someone to not come through the natural route of the NWSL and then get so many appearances is definitely on the rarer side.
In my limited experience of researching this, that is very rare. It's like often those contracts, you don't even end up making an appearance. It's like you just join the training team and that's it, right? Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's exactly accurate. It can be actually really frustrating from a player's perspective because you're not necessarily given the time it needs to gel with a squad to earn yourself appearances. But obviously it worked out in this case.
What did you see from watching the tape of Taylor Aylmer? I was only able to see her play for Rutgers. I didn't see anything for Washington Spirit. Did you?
Nope, wasn't able to see that either. But I was definitely able to pick up some technical notes, which I think do translate from the collegiate game to professional game. You don't really lose those types of things, I would hope. Yeah. First thing that comes to mind is she's proficient with both her left and right foot. Not sure which ones are dominant, but that's crucial, especially in the middle of the park. I thought that was great and will bode well for her. I also think that she's super active. She's one of those buzz players that just covers a lot of ground, is annoying as heck to defend. And I think she's going to create some good chaos, oxymoronically.
I like it. I thought from the stuff that I saw for her time, I think it was mostly Rutgers that I saw. I don't know if I saw anything outside of that. Holds up play well, likes the ball played to her feet for the half turn in midfield. She's pretty quick and decisive when she does receive the ball. She keeps her head on a swivel, which you want to see. Hopefully, as you mentioned, Abby, that's one of those things that will translate to the professional game that as a Zephyr FC player. Good passer of the ball. I mean, the 14 assists she had for Rutgers must have come from somewhere. I saw some glimpses of a confident dribbler. We'll see if that is just highlights. Maybe average or below average speed, and doesn't seem to really use her height, and doesn't play tall. As if, she's 5'7". She's not huge, but
yeah, I'm curious how physical this league's going to be. That's a big question mark in my mind. How much is the ball going to be bouncing? How much is the ball going to be over the head of our midfield, right? That's a big question. And if physicality is even a factor is going to be, again, a question mark. I think you mentioned speed, and this is something that I'll say time and time again. In the midfield, it's not necessarily who can get from point A to point B the fastest. It's honestly who can get from point A to point B the smartest. And I think she has, from what I can see in her clips, really good off the ball movement. She's very proactive in that space. And so I think regardless of her speed, in a dead sprint, I think she's smart enough to get in the pockets of space that you need both offensively and defensively.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think the note about how physical this league will play will dictate the success or failure for a lot of these players. To your point also, it reminds me a little bit of the Pep Guardiola philosophy of he would much rather a player use their feet to pass the ball to a space than to be sprinting around like a headless chicken. So again, despite what I thought might be a average or below average speed, she is quick and decisive when she does get the ball. And that's, like you said, it's better to play smart sometimes. And that's what I saw a little bit of that. Position and role. Again, what would you think for Taylor as far as position and role with the team?
Just looking at this whole roster and doing our research, Benji, my question mark lies around the 6th position. And I actually think that she could be a very active 6, whether that's a double pivot defensively where a center back is coming in to play the double 6. I think she could play an active 6 in that role, or just a standard double 6 where she gets forward into more of an 8 role. I think she's just a buzz player, and I'll say that time and time again. I would like to see her at the 6.
I'm writing this down. Buzz player. I think we have similar notes on this. I thought she could deputize as a 10, but looked far more like an 8 or a holding 6. I didn't see a lot of defensive contribution, but who knows? Maybe that's just the way that she put her video together.
The one thing I will say, she has experience both in the NWSL, but also in Finland, which is a very rough league. So I don't think she's someone that would shy away from a tackle if she had 12 appearances in Finland. But time will tell on that. I think you have a really good point in terms of defensive side of things. If you're a 6, especially a single 6, you're definitely going to have to shore up your defensive side.
The Spokane Soccer Show is supported by Spokane City Credit Union. Are you a customer at a big dumb bank? Well, stop it. At a bank, you're just a customer. At a credit union, you're a member and a shareholder. You can help make decisions about what the credit union does do or doesn't do. Banks just want to get bigger by swallowing up smaller banks one at a time until there's only 1 or 2 banks left. Nobody wants that. Well, except for big banks. Since 1934, Spokane City Credit Union has remained independent, relevant, and local, with a focus on the financial needs of individuals and families in Spokane City. Go to sccu.net, Spokane City Credit Union, serving Spokane one member at a time. Okay, next up, Emma Jaskaniec, 23-year-old, 5'8" midfielder. She grew up in Menominee Falls, Wisconsin, which is a village northwest of Milwaukee. So we've had a hamlet and a village so far in these areas where folks grew up on the team. Her amateur experience includes playing ECNL club soccer for FC Wisconsin Eclipse. She committed to University of Wisconsin at age 14. I had in parentheses, what? Is that a thing? You know this. I know nothing about what it would be like to be a college player. Is that weird?
So there's been a rule change where you technically can't commit that early now.
Okay.
But she might have been just before that rule change. And so, yeah, these highly sought after players were definitely committing at age 14, freshman year. It's not something that was rare.
Okay. Crazy to me. All right. Get ready to have big eyes at this statistic. 91 appearances for University of Wisconsin, 37 goals, 15 assists, and 7,500 minutes of play. She was an all Big Ten freshman. She was the Big Ten midfielder of the year as a senior, Big Ten first team and second team All-American.
Yeah, like a lot of these players did really well in college. Of course, you're going to get drafted. And so she was drafted to the Utah Royals.
Well, what happened in a couple of these, and I saw that we both had notes on this, some of these players didn't even sign a contract that was before the NWSL season had even started or it had just started. My reading between the lines on Emma is that, and I think I read this, she picked up an injury in training with the Royals, and then, despite being a second round draft pick, and was like, I don't see I'm looking at the depth chart. I don't know if I'm going to play.
Like you said, Benji, she followed like a pretty typical path. She gets into the mix, either an injury or just sees the depth chart and realizes that you're probably going to be sitting on the bench for the foreseeable. And so that just didn't work out in her favor. Biggest takeaway from that for me is no game time. Coming in, obviously she's probably been training, but no match time in a professional jersey. I do, before I transition, I want to mention the statistics you rattled off. Those are insane. Yeah. Those,
dude, I thought so,
are insane. I like to be careful because I am a player that had 4 very different years in college, statistic wise. And so I want to look at her senior year, and she had 12 goals and as a midfielder. And so
as a midfielder,
that to me, green light as a coach, get that kid as close to the box as possible.
The one thing about her that there isn't a lot of tape though, Emma, I'm just going to say it. I found like some kid who worked in the AV club, maybe at Wisconsin, I don't know where, put together like a highlight package of like a hat trick that she scored. That's about all I could find. There is no like mixtape on her. The only other thing I had a note on is that I really loved the way that she spoke in some of the interviews that I stumbled upon. Liked her very outspoken thoughts on the role of meditation and addressing some anxiety that she had. She was quite public about it, especially as a kid, a young player who went through COVID.
I actually want to touch on the meditation and anxiety side of things, because I think it can be quite insightful in terms of team culture. And so
Hmm.
in regards to her role, I think that would be, if she is vocal about that and if she can integrate that within the team, I think that'll be a fantastic role for her, especially, one of the younger players. In terms of on the pitch, like I said, having scoring midfield is super valuable. You need her close to the goal. And so in a dual 10 system, definitely one of the higher ones, pushed up by the 9. And in a single 10, yeah, again, just pushed up nice and high. Hopefully that gap isn't created, from the holding mids and then the attacking mid with her getting high. But no, I think I see her in more of an attacking role than anything.
She feels like she fits a similar profile to Wayny Balata as attacking midfield players that are maybe a little more box to box. I have kind of a note that, is she like a Frank Lampard role? Could she also play a 9? Very interesting. Looking at the numbers on paper, I'm like, how is she a midfielder? Those are like center forward numbers.
Yeah, I mean it's so fascinating, and I'm curious where she's going to land. When you mentioned the 9, I do have a holdout, and it's going to be the one we're talking about next for a potential false 9 situation. So I
Okay.
do see Emma as a true 10, not necessarily floating into the 9 position, but again, time will tell. So excited, and literally, Emma, please put any more highlights up that you have so we can gather some more information.
Yeah, no kidding. I might just have to wait to actually see her play games, which is fine. I hope that player that I'm going to talk about next is who you were thinking of. So moving on, Mollie Rouse,
Oh yeah.
25-year-old, 5'3" midfielder. Mollie grew up in Warwick, which is in the middle of which is in the West Midlands, I should say, in England, south of Coventry. She supports the Sky Blues of Coventry City, in case you're wondering. She also said mostly her brother. She doesn't really consider herself a huge supporter. Played in Aston Villa's youth academy, led the U17 Aston Villa team to the Center of Excellence League Championship in 2014, made 24 appearances and had 5 goals as an England youth team player. Holy cow. Came to the United States and played for University of Louisville. She only played 2 years, in part because she was juggling national team duty. This kid, my goodness, 12 starts, 4 goals, and 2 assists in only 1,000 minutes for Louisville. Like I said, she juggled national team obligations, which limited her time. Then went to University of Central Florida for her final year of eligibility, and again juggled national team duty and only played a handful of games for them. Was part of the 2018 Under 20 World Cup squad for England. That's her amateur experience only, and holy cow, what pedigree for Mollie Rouse. What do you know about her experience as a professional, and any other insights you want to add about Mollie?
I try
Abby.
not to get too excited just because she's English, but it does
I
play
know,
a
me
factor.
too.
It really does play a factor. And so obviously, yes, she was juggling her collegiate career and her youth national team experience, which you can say what you will about that, but I think there are a lot of positives to take. In terms of her professional experience, again, it's a long laundry list. She played at Lewis. She played at London City, both in the championship. She then went on to play in Germany at Turbine Potsdam, which a very reputable team. I know a lot of girls who have played there as well. Then she returned home to play for Sunderland. I just see these names and my eyes light up because you have proper English footballer coming to Zephyr.
Yeah, and she did quite well for some of these teams too. I saw some of the highlights from her play for London City Lionesses, and she was putting in some work. I'm so glad you know some of these teams. Obviously, I know Sunderland. The very first question I had to ask her is, of course, as a Newcastle supporter, is did you leave Sunderland a Sunderland fan? She was just like, she doesn't seem like she really follows professional soccer herself. So
What?
I breathed a sigh of relief. Well, I mean, she said she grew up near Coventry and doesn't even consider herself a huge supporter of the Sky Blues. You had in your notes that she played against Arsenal.
Yes, I was going to bring that up. Got the jersey. So that's one thing that she definitely brings to the table because they have these different cup games. So FA Cup, these teams in the lower leagues, second division, let's just say they can play these first division teams. And so I think it's great exposure that she's had, playing, I would say probably defensively most of those games against these big time players and big time teams.
Do you have any other notes that you saw from watching her tape?
Yes, I this is a player that I'm excited to see. I do think that she could play a rotating 9-10 position. So she sits in the 10 and then eventually interchanges with the 9 drops in and she goes in behind. She is a smaller player, so defensively not sure what she can do, but she did play in Germany, which is quite a physical league. But what I think she's going to bring to the table, what I think her X factor is her tactical awareness. That's what you're bred as in the English system, is to really understand and read what other players are doing. So she's going to be able to see the 9 dropping in and go in behind, see where her 8 is, see even where the outside back is. I think that's going to bode well for her in terms of soccer IQ wise.
Yeah, that's a great note. What do you think? Where else could she play? You mentioned this idea of her playing as swapping with a 9 as a 10. What else do you see her doing?
To be honest, I see her not pigeonholed to that position, but I do think there's so much pace on the wings already in this roster that I would keep more of those tactical-minded players centrally. So if she wanted to drop back in the 8 potentially, one thing I will mention that's vastly different from England that it is from America, and obviously she did play somewhat collegiately, but dependent on how transitional this league is, a lot of times these tactical 10s can have their heads spinning because they're not touching the ball as much as you would be in England. And I'm curious if she falls into that category or not. But truthfully, I see her in the middle of the park, whether that's a 10 or an 8. Personally, I see her on an interchange of a 9 and 10.
I love that note because I haven't gotten to our forwards yet. And I very much take your word because as we were signing these players, I did take a peek at some of them, and we do have some winger options. So the idea that she would play as a wing when she was signed as a midfielder and labeled as a midfielder does make me think you're right. They're going to try to use her in the middle of the park. Next player, Katie Murray, 27-year-old, 5'3" midfielder. Katie grew up in Cincinnati, where she played youth club soccer for Kings Hammer FC, which is a USLW and League Two affiliate / I think they might have, if I remember correctly, they might have had some ECNL teams in their midst too. 2-time All-State high school player in Ohio. She then was recruited and played for the University of Illinois in college, where she had 73 appearances, 13 goals, and 4 assists in 5,200 minutes of play. Katie was all Big Ten second team, Big Ten all tournament team as a senior. And she also played for the Dayton Dutch Lions WPSL team as a sophomore. Anybody familiar with the podcast who's been following the Spokane Shadow women's team, that is a WPSL team. It is the largest women's soccer league in the United States, 130 teams or something like that. It is an amateur pre-professional league, but nonetheless, that's who she played for. Let's talk about her professional experience, Abby. Where did Katie go as a pro so far?
I have a quick follow-up question. The team that you just mentioned, Dutch, is that an affiliation with the Netherlands?
Which team? The Dayton team?
Yes.
I don't know.
It's just
a great question.
It's relevant because there could be a linkage to her professional career. I do have a question on it, but let's just start from her origins professional.
The Dayton Dutch Lions. You've got, dude. They are. I love you, Abby. This is why you're on the podcast, my friend. They are an American feeder team for Dutch team FC 20. If you know anything about Dutch soccer, FC 20 Eredivisie team, pretty legendary. Been part of the league since 59 years. Wow, great shout. Yes, I did not realize that. So and Dayton Dutch Lions.
I wouldn't know the local team or anything like that, but when you said Dutch, and then I made a linkage to her professional career, that something jumped off the page to me, and I'll explain in a second, but let's just start at her origins. She started in Finland professionally at a club called Miran before going over to the Netherlands, which an American is so strange. Like, most Americans can't get into that league, so I'm curious if she does have dual citizenship, because she went over to play for PEC Zwolle, which is not one. I mean, they've fluctuated over the years, but usually if an American, highly touted American, is going to go to Netherlands, they're going to go to Ajax or FC 20. So that's why there's a big question mark for me in regards to her. Maybe she has dual citizenship. Who knows? I
love this. I'm going to have to find out. Okay. I have a quick note. She also played for a Spanish team called Tenerife in the Canary Islands, and it was during the COVID year, so it's kind of a limbo year. But all I was going to say is, Katie, I hope you had a good ass time playing for Tenerife in the Canary Islands.
I have a teammate who actually played there about a year ago, and she would send taunting
for
us.
Tenerife for that club specifically.
Yes, it's a great club
That's awesome.
in terms of play. But she would send us videos and pictures from the beach, and it was just taunting. But she also was in and out with the Spirit over the years, and so
Yeah, she was
obviously
another
has
national team replacement player. Yeah.
right. So she does have that NWSL experience. But really, really curious about the Dutch ties here.
Okay, tell me what you saw in the tape. I can't wait to talk about Katie because she has a lot of tape. Shout out Katie for putting some tape together for us.
She did have a lot of tape, and I still have some question marks, Benji.
Okay, let's go.
Okay, we'll start with the positives. She looks like she possesses the ball really well, which is key. And I say that like that's superficial, but in terms of possessing a ball well, I don't just mean like she keeps it and plays a simple pass. She's
Yep.
making these complex passes and connecting them. You need a high percentage completion rate in the midfield at this level, and I think that she can actually bring that to this team from her highlight.
For Katie Murray, my comparison so far with the players we've talked about is she looks similar to Taylor Aylmer in terms of being comfortable on the half turn in the midfield. What I liked a lot, and this feels like something when you had a note in, I saw your notes about wanting to see how she's developed as a pro versus what we saw of her college tape, right? Is just a very balanced on ball runner and someone ready to run at people, like a head down runner, and looks fast. So looks can be deceiving with that stuff. You're also looking at a runner, going against college players. And I don't know anything about the level of college that players that she faced when she played for University of Illinois. University of Illinois is what, a big Big Ten team. Very technically skilled, has some flair. Have you ever played FIFA soccer on the PlayStation or whatever? She'd have the trait flair. She has a great first touch. She's very technically skilled. She had a Travella in one of the games that I saw. She also, I don't know if you caught this moment, but one of her highlights was an assist from a free kick. And she immediately jumps into a front handspring celebration as the deliverer of the assist on this free kick. And I thought that was just hilarious. She just immediately does a front handspring. So she's got a little flair to her game. You like to see that. Yeah.
You know me, Benji.
I do. I do. We have notes on you too. She can play physical. She's like the first midfielder I saw in all these tapes that I watched who actually made a tackle. So I thought that was great. And she definitely seems like she has a motor. So I would expect work rate out of Katie. Yeah. Anyway, position and role. What do you anticipate?
Yeah,
because you're right. This midfield, real quickly to set everybody up, it does seem like there's some things to work out. There's only 3, maybe 4 positions in midfield, and there's a lot of choices here, and how it's all going to fit together is going to be very interesting. Where do you see Katie fitting in?
Yeah, as a coach, I have so many problems already because you have vastly different players for those 3 spots, and you need them to click together. The chemistry of the 3 is so crucial. But I'll go back to what you just said. Her motor and her ability to put a tackle in, for me, is a box-to-box 8, a true one that's going to travel distance. And when you need her to, she will get behind the ball, put a tackle in. But also, like you said, she's very technical, and therefore can keep the ball in tight spaces. So I see her as a true box-to-box midfielder.
Probably an 8. And the question I have is the same one you did, which is like, how has her game developed? Because the college level of play in the video that I saw, frankly, just looked too easy for her. So she was one of those players that's like, she needs to play against some more difficult opposition. Next up, this is a big marquee signing. There's no 2 ways about it. Sophie Braun, 24-year-old, 5'7" midfielder. Sophie grew up in Beaverton, Oregon. She's a dual citizen. She has played for Argentina's senior team. As an amateur, she played for the Jesuit Crusaders in high school, appeared in the 2017 High School All-American game. She was a 2-time state champion. Her high school was ranked 2nd in the nation when she was a senior. She was recruited by Chris Watkins, anyone who has followed this podcast before, and the very first thing I focused on, which was Gonzaga women's team. Chris Watkins, their head coach, he started in 2016. One of his first recruits to come play for Gonzaga was Sophie Braun. Could have done a lot worse, let's just say that. She made 82 appearances for Gonzaga, had 8 goals and 3 assists in 5,700 minutes, and she was first team all WCC as a junior and a senior. She also had 4 caps and a goal for Argentina's under 20 team. and has had thus far 29 senior appearances for Argentina, where she's bagged 2 goals for their senior team, including a world-class Golazo versus South Africa. Absolute worldy banger. This is a huge signing because obviously she played for Gonzaga, and so she has so many ties to the local area and Spokane. Tell me about Sophie, Abby, as far as her professional experience is concerned thus far.
Quickly, I want to touch, because I'm a technical nerd, the strike that she had in the World Cup. I had to rewatch it a few times just to see, the proficiency, and that she can repeat that same technique. So I'm excited to see that. Also, when I saw that she was a Gonzaga player, I was like, Benji, light bulb. Like, were you actively like looking at her as a player?
It's a really good question. Yes, but never in my wildest dreams would I have thought that she would end up playing for Zephyr FC. So talk a little bit about her, where she's gone so far, and her very brief professional experience, as well as and then feel free to talk about what you've seen about her as a player.
Yeah, so after college, she signed for Club Leon in Mexico, which is a really newer league, but very, very reputable, where she scored 2 goals. And she was actually playing a more defensive role. And so that was great to see that she was able to score from that position. She then signed with KC Current, but hasn't seen any time with them at all.
Quick question for you. Is that when she played for the Liga MX Femenil in Mexico, is that where they got the idea that she was a center back? Because Wikipedia has her listed as a center back. She's definitely not going to play center back for Velocity unless it's in a pinch.
I'm confused, and I was going to ask you about this. On the Zephyr FC website, is she listed as a midfielder?
Yeah, she is. Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
And Kansas City, I think, as well.
Honestly, they should have listed her as a center back, because then they could surprise teams, because I think that she's going to play the 6.
Oh, totally. Yeah. You're jumping ahead, and you're absolutely correct.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a great note about she is. So just to be clear, Sophie is the first ever NWSL to USL Super League loan transaction. There have been others since, I believe, but she was the first. And there were some pretty pissed supporters of Kansas City Current who are familiar with her pedigree as an Argentina national team player, but she just apparently doesn't feature in Vlatko Antonovsky's plans, their head coach. So much to the chagrin of their supporters, she was transferred here. That's why I would have never thought about her, because I saw that, she went to Club Leon and then, signed with Current. I'm like, and she plays for Argentina. Like, we're not going to get Sophie Braun. I looked at a lot of recent grads from Gonzaga and thought about who could end up coming home, so to speak. And
right, I think her lack of play at Current is a big question mark, because when she did sign, there were a lot of press releases talking about, is she the question to the midfield for KC Current? And then you don't get featured. So I'm reading between the lines a bit on that. It doesn't completely line up for me, especially 25 appearances with Argentina. But this could just demonstrate how brilliant the USL is to give players opportunities, really, to perform. Yeah. When you are that quality, you are on par with these NWSL players, and you're just not getting the shot for whatever reason. Here you are. Here's a league for you to go play in and do your stuff. I do think her film kind of showed a little bit of flair. I think she's excellent on the ball, put it that way. She's very comfortable. I think we saw in some of her film dribbling out of the center back position into that midfield, very comfortable on the ball, which I think bodes well for that pivot 6 position.
I mean, this is what's going to feel really familiar to a lot of my listeners. For Gonzaga, for Chris Watkins, she played as a holding 6 who would carry the ball into the attack as a single pivot in a 4-3-3, very similar to one of my favorite players for Gonzaga, Chelsea Lee. Chelsea Lee, to me, I always describe her as like their Pirlo. She's just so capable as a dribbler. She'll tackle, she'll press, she's great at recoveries, and she links play when she does bring the ball forward. So it feels like Chelsea grabbed the baton from Sophie Braun under Chris Watkins. So I'm guessing that she was like the understudy, because I see a lot of the same play. Excellent passer. So fun for me catching up on some of these players to watch Sophie Braun linking up with some of my Gonzaga friends like Marissa Garcia, Paige Alexander, who still play for Gonzaga, because I got to remember, she just graduated in 2023. So she's still very young before she went to Leon. I think you and I are very much on the same page of where we see this going in terms of what her role is going to be. But go ahead and tell us what you think that's going to be, Abby.
Well, I'll try and switch it up for you. I'm curious.
Yeah.
Do you think she will slip back into center back?
I don't know where. I don't see any record of where she's played center back. So if I make an assumption right now, it'd be she's nailed on as the 6 in a 4-3-3. But that's if we don't know. I'm going to have a conversation soon with Joe Johnson. I don't think Joe Johnson's going to come right out and say I'm going to play a 4-3-3, but 4-3-3 is super common right now. It's actually what I expected Lee Veidman to play with Velocity before he surprised me by playing 4-2-3-1. I don't know how much of that has to do with the Velocity's player signings and whether or not he wanted to choose a different formation. Who knows? Because he's currently playing a 3-4-3. I digress. So if they play with a midfield 3, I assume she'll be nailed on as the starting 6. But
the easy answer is I do think she would be in that 6 role. The hard answer is you could do a lot of things in terms of creating a box midfield from a back 4, right? You could either slip one of your outside backs in, tuck them in, or you can pull one of your center backs into that 6th spot, creating the box. So, I mean, I do think we're pretty stacked already in terms of center back, so might as well just keep her out of the back line, but that could be an option in my mind.
I'm so curious what you mean by stacked at center back, because we're coming to defender soon. But for our last midfield player, I believe it's our last midfield player. Yep. We're going to talk about Emina Ekić, 25-year-old, 5'4" midfielder. Emina grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. She's another dual citizen. Her parents are from Bosnia and Herzegovina. She's made 2 appearances for Bosnia and Herzegovina in friendlies. And as an amateur, she played club soccer for, I don't know if I'm going to get this pronunciation correct, probably not, Jaskaniec FC in Louisville. She was a 2-time Gatorade High School Player of the Year in Kentucky in 2015 and 2016. She played all 4 years of her college soccer for Louisville University, where she made 66 appearances, scored 29 goals, had 19 assists in 5,000 minutes. She was the co-freshman of the year and made the All-ACC second team and was the first team All-ACC 3 times as a sophomore, junior, and senior, and second team All-American twice. Holy cow. And by the way, in the ACC, that's no easy feat. I almost want to pause there before we move on to her professional experience thus far. My goodness, this player, her amateur pedigree is like wild.
It's insane. I try not to read too much into the collegiate game because I do think there are a lot of spaces where things can get gray and you can look a lot better than you are. But this pedigree does not lie. The leagues that she's been a part of, the players that have been around her, and for her to stand out doesn't lie for me.
We added both Sophie Braun and Emina Ekić late, so I'm going to just give a couple more details and then we could talk about what we expect from her as a player, Emina. She was drafted 5th overall by Racing Louisville as an expansion team in the NWSL draft in 2021. So she just stayed home. She just kept on playing in Kentucky. And I have notes on why where she's ended up is very surprising to me. She made 35 appearances for Racing Louisville, scored 3 goals, including a beautiful free kick that I uploaded to Instagram. She was then loaned to Melbourne City, which is an affiliate club of Manchester City. They play in Australia's A-League, where she had 6 appearances and scored 4 goals. The loan ended. Racing waived her even before her contract was over with them so that she could sign a contract with Melbourne City. She had an injury. I think she broke her ankle, but then went on to play for them and made 21 more appearances, scored another 8 goals in the A-League in the 2023 to 2024 season. But then, as from what I was able to read, she wanted to return to the U.S. and pursue opportunities here, and the Super League came calling. So just a fascinating player as far as so prolific, like so freaking prolific.
And I think what's important to note is that injury that she had. I think I was watching one of her interviews and she said that she fractured her fibula. But
Oof.
The relevancy here is that she was prolific before and after. There wasn't a drop off. And I think that shows an instinctual ability to be prolific in the attack.
There's not actually a lot of tape on her. I only see there's like a compilation of some goals that she's scored. So there's anybody, and like frankly, all these players, I wish I had more video, but specifically given the output of Emma Jaskaniec and Emina Ekić, I wish I had more tape to watch because they've scored a lot of goals. They've been very productive on the attacking side of things, but just crazy power and placement as a free kick specialist. Just a wicked left foot.
Ekić will try for it and hit! Oh my goodness, Emina Ekić!
So I will make sure to include that when we're talking about Emina in this video. She has an insane left foot. No idea what she looks like anywhere else because there's no video. So I'm guessing she's a forward or a winger, but I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about where Emina Ekić will play in this team for this team? She's listed as a midfielder, and I frankly don't know how that's possible. She looks like a winger to me.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a tough one. I just see a lot of players. I see a lot of players in the midfield already, again, for that 3 max 4 spot. And so why put her in the midfield? For me, she could definitely play a winger position. I don't see her as a 9. Although she's super prolific, I just see her finding those creative spaces in between, the outside touch line and the 9. So a more tucked in winger. So almost like a 10 that sits into that pocket. So that's kind of where I see her in the lineup. But what's relevant here and what I want to highlight is that not only does she have these crazy stats amateur wise, which a lot of our players do, a lot of the players that we're talking about do, but she has, again, is consistent and she goes on to do the same thing professionally. Like that consistency is an X factor in the professional game.
She's done it for Melbourne City. She's done it for racing. So yeah, it's pretty impressive. I can't wait to see what she looks like as a player. We just finished the midfielders, but before we move on, I want to talk about another midfielder, Abby Carchio, 26-year-old, 5'6" midfielder, grew up in Lakeville, Massachusetts. Abby is also, I found this out, this is fascinating, a second-degree black belt in Taekwondo?
Yeah.
Still second degree, or have you added a degree, Abby?
No, I haven't. I still have my second degree. I had no idea that you were going to do a deep dive into my past, Benji. So this comes as a surprise. But yeah, most of the people close to me do know that. I did Taekwondo for 11 years and do have a second degree black belt.
You kick a lot of things as an athlete, and apparently you kick ass as well. So you played club soccer for New England Football Club Elite. You won the 2015 NPL National Premier League Under-18 national title. You played alongside our friend Sydney Cummings, who we're going to talk about in case you missed it, at Brown University, where you made 58 appearances, scored 16 goals, 17 assists in just 4,000 minutes, which is insane production. You were first team All Ivy League as a sophomore, a junior, and a senior. You were third team All Region, second team All Region as a junior and senior, respectively. You finished your career 15th all time in career points with 49 at Brown University. In case people don't remember, a goal is 2 points, an assist is 1 point. It's a college thing. They call it points. It's very bizarre. It feels like a hockey thing, like points. What? Anyway, you have had over 20 appearances thus far as a professional for clubs throughout Europe, including Saint Etienne and most recently at Lone Town in the Republic of Ireland. We talked about that in our last podcast, but you know what? I felt like I owed it to you to talk about who you are as a player because your bona fides matter when we have you on this podcast talking about soccer players. This is what I saw. Now, I just have to make an example of you, Abby, so you don't get a chance to talk for just a second while I gush about you. My goodness, you and Sydney both, as professionals who are preparing to play professional soccer, you've done it right. Any women, men, I don't care, out there that are young amateur players that are looking to play professionally, do what these two have done. They have like 30 minutes apiece of tape. I got to watch a lot of you two playing soccer as both amateur players and as professional players. You are a very capable finisher with either foot. I can't believe your production. 16 goals and 17 assists and only 4,000 minutes. I had to ask Sydney. I texted her today. It's like, is she right or left-footed? Because I genuinely couldn't tell. And she laughed and she said, she's barely right-footed. And I'm looking at these videos and I'm like, half the finishes I see are with your left foot. You love to crash the box as a trailing 10. You have loads of finesse as a shooter. Very silky dribbler and a playmaker. You will beat defenders for days. You'll find teammates. You have like literally every attacking trait in the bag. Weighted passes, can finish with either foot. You're capable on set pieces. You'll take on defenders. You're also not afraid to go to ground. You've made sure to put like a couple tackles in your video. I have one question about you as a player. I was like, she is a bit of an upright runner, but you know what? So was Zinedine Zidane. And she is on the slender, lithe side of physique as a soccer player. And I thought, this is why I'm really curious about the USL Super League. How would you deal with the physical side of the game? And I'm kind of curious I'm going to finish by saying you definitely flashed some of the same stuff that you did for Brown University in your time as a pro that I could see in the tape, but you definitely seem to be set up differently as a player. Like you mentioned it already. So you kind of led the witness, and it vibes with what I saw in the video of you as a player. But talk a little bit about what you experienced as a very productive attacking player in college and what you've seen so far in your professional career. Abby Carchio.
Wow, Benji. I didn't know you were going to go all the way back. Lot to break down there. In terms of being a very different player, I was, that reigns true. At Brown, I was very different. I was kind of more of that flashy kid that would, like we talked about in the last pod, just do the craziest things for no reason, just for show. And that works when you're playing in the Ivy League. Like I was kind of a dime a dozen, or I was kind of, one to do things that other people wouldn't do. And that boded well for me in the Ivy League. That doesn't exactly work when you're going over to France, playing in a very technical league, where everyone else can do everything that you can do. Everyone else can use both feet. Everyone else can, do a nutmeg. And so I had to adjust my game to really get into starting lineups. And so I was moved into more of an 8 role purely because at Brown, I was probably like middle of the pack fitness wise. In Europe, top of the table, which was amazing for my psyche. And so they saw that I can run, and they put me at the 8. And then eventually at Lone Town, I was playing more of a six role, purely because I could see more of the field. I'm not athletic. Like, I don't care what anyone says. I'm not fast. I'm not agile. I'm not big. So I guess I had to adapt in my game and just be more cerebral than anybody. And that's kind of how I've had some success. I'm curious where you got my stats professionally, though, because I don't know how true.
Which stats? Oh, I just whatever, knocked together a couple things. You mean when I mentioned the 20 appearances? How many appearances have you made as a pro?
I hope a lot more than 20. I mean, when I was in, I hope. I mean, I played 22 games for Saint Etienne in the second division, so I'm sure those.
Then my numbers are way off.
Those might be. Yeah, I did play more than 20 professional games, everybody. But to concisely answer that, you do. That's why I mentioned before with these other players, kind of there's a massive transition, and I just had to adapt my game. I think a lot of these players who are walking the dog and making players look like cones are not going to be able to do that in the professional league, which I found to be the same. So you either have to sit on the bench or adapt your game and find something that, again, gives you an X factor.
The thing is, I had not seen the two of you. I hadn't done this kind of treatment of you as players because I had just become friends with you through the podcast. And then, of course, Sydney joining the team. And when I was done watching the tape today, I was just like, I'm going to file this away and start dropping them into DMs to some of the people at Zephyr FC, because my goodness, it was so impressive. And I'll stop because I don't want to embarrass you. This episode of the Spokane Soccer Show is brought to you by Feast World Kitchen. If you know, you know. If you don't know, I'm about to tell you. Think authentic, mouth-watering cuisine from all over the world delivered to your mouth right here in downtown Spokane. Here's the part you might not have known. Feast is a nonprofit that effectively creates chef entrepreneurs by offering a bunch of programs where immigrants and former refugees learn career skills, earn income from their food sales, and build connections in the community. Quick sidebar, I still have daydreams about the beef sambusas and the spicy jollof rice that we had during the AFCON watch party in January. But don't take my word for it. Head down to Feast World Kitchen on 3rd Avenue, follow them on Instagram, or go to their website at feastworldkitchen.org. All right, are you ready to talk about defenders that have been signed? We have 6 of them to talk about. Abby?
Absolutely. I am thrilled to talk about, sometimes the most forgotten position on the field, defenders.
First up, and I believe might have been the first defender signed. I think so. Makena Carr 23-year-old, 5'3" fullback. She grew up in Newcastle. My favorite. No, Newcastle, Washington. It's a small town south of Bellevue in King County. Stop it. It's near Seattle. You get the idea. Played amateur soccer for ECNL team East Side FC. She was a Seattle Times Player of the Year in 2017 after winning a high school state championship with Liberty High School. She was signed to play for University of Washington. Had a very COVID-y, injury-riddled time for University of Washington. She is one of the regrettable statistics in women's soccer. 1 in 19 female soccers will suffer a torn ACL, including my guest and friend, Abby Carchio. Oh, damn ACLs. But she did make 39 appearances and 10 starts, had 2 goals and 2 assists in only 1,400 minutes for University of Washington before transferring for her final extra year of COVID eligibility to St. Mary's, where she made 18 appearances, started all 18, so clearly didn't have any issues with that ACL recovery, and had a goal and 2 assists. One of those assists, and I mentioned this because I uploaded some tape on Makena early on when I found out who she played for. One of those assists was against my beloved Gonzaga, and I remember the game, and I remember being crestfallen. I was at Hat Trick Brewing with my daughters, and Gonzaga lost that game. They had so much momentum at this point too, and they went and played St. Mary's at St. Mary's, and Makena assisted the goal that was scored, the 1-0 loss. Ugh, still aggravated about that. But she went on to become an all WCC first team player for 2023. And then what happened?
So she was drafted in the 2024 draft, 43rd overall to the Reign. She did not sign after that, did not play with them. So this is going to be her first real professional gig. But she is coming off of a really prolific 5th year, as you mentioned.
Yeah. What did you think of, did you get to see her tape, and what did you think of the player? What did you see in her play?
Yeah, I think she's actually a really versatile outside back for me. I think she has great pace, solid speed, and what I loved was that she was not afraid to take players on 1v1, especially higher up the pitch. You know, I always have these qualms with outside backs that take players on in their own third, but it looked like from her highlight tape, she made wise choices, either in the middle third or the final third. That's where she was taking them on. But I think this is going to be a really integral facet of this Zephyr team is these outside backs getting high and into the attack.
Yeah, I mean, of all the notes that we've talked about when it comes to how is this player's game as an amateur, as a college player going to translate to the pro game, I probably have some of the most questions about players like Makena, because when I'm watching video of her play at St. Mary's, and she gave a lot of video in her. Thank you, Makena, for having a great YouTube highlight of your play as a college player. Glued to the touchline, right-footed but comfortable inverting and underlapping. I think if teams are sloppy with her and they try to make line-breaking passes, she'll read them well. So she's got a good nose for watching the game as a defender. One highlight in particular that I just loved, she reads a fullback's attempted pass to a winger. They're playing against Loyola Marymount, right? Intercepts the ball, begins the counter, makes this underlapping run using the center forward who had come back to help out. The center forward does a great job, drags both a center back and a fullback to the edge of the box, squares it back to Makena, who finishes it with her first touch from the top of the box. It was just a lovely goal. And if I were her, I would have made a special separate video just of that moment, because it's like one of those things as a player, you're like, she couldn't have done more. I mean, she intercepts the ball, begins the counter, links up with her center forward rewards her, has a beautiful finish, scores a goal, and she was super hyped on this. So probably has the left back role to herself from what I can tell, kind of right now. I think we've got a glut of right backs, unless someone who we signed in the right, because I think some of the other players that we're going to talk about could probably play the 2 or 3. But what did you think about where you see her playing?
Yeah, I think you're right in that there is less competition on the left, but you always it's coach's choice, really. However you want to play that winger to outside back relationship, whether you cut in, sink into the inside pocket, or stay touchline. Obviously, it looks like she likes to stay on the touchline, so it would make the most sense to put her on the left. So I'm curious where she falls in the depth chart, to be honest, because I'll say this, and I'll use myself as reference. I was a really good 1v1 in college.
Yeah, you were.
And that didn't necessarily translate to the professional game. I just think that you are up against people who actually know how to defend. And I'm curious how that pans out for her at that left back position in an attacking sense.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see her trying to take people on a lot, and she's not one of the players that I would put at the top of the list of these players that we've talked about so far without having gotten to the forwards yet, of who I would favor to beat someone in a one-on-one situation. We just talked about Emina Ekić. I definitely favor her to do that. She did it in college. She's already done it as a pro. So yeah, I'll be really curious to see. Maybe she could play winger. Next up, another fullback, Julianne Vallerand, 23-year-old, 5'6" fullback. Another Canadian player who grew up in, I'm probably not going to get the pronunciation correct, Terrebonne, Quebec. Primary language is French, hence me attempting clumsy French. Highly decorated as a youth player, part of a Quebec team that won the 2017 Canada Games, was named to the best 11 in that tournament. Played as an under 15 and under 17 Canada national team player. Was recruited by West Virginia University, where she made 80 appearances as a college player, had 16 goals, 6 assists, and 6,000 minutes of play. Her team won the Big 12 championship in 2022. So, Abby, she doesn't have any professional experience to speak of, but what did you see about her as a player thus far as an amateur college player?
First things first, 16 goals and 6 assists as a defender.
Yeah.
Did that catch your eye?
It definitely did. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a crazy amount. I think she, from what I can see, she's right-footed but likes to cut in, and that makes me think potentially could be up for that left outside back that we were just talking about. Will she struggle playing for the first time against girls that are 10 years older than her?
Attacking players have to be really effective on ball to beat her. So she is good, a good standing tackler, has decent feet. But the one thing I didn't think, again, I said this about Makena too, I don't see her getting around a bunch of people. She's not going to be some super pacey, effective dribbler. Certainly not as a professional, I wouldn't think. So again, so prolific with 16 goals and 6 assists, it does make me think that even more so than potentially Makena Carr, she's going to really want to get involved in an attack. So
it's also something to note in terms of how you're defending. And Sydney will laugh probably if she hears me describe this. But in college, a lot of times defenders stay home and therefore they're defending 1v1, someone's running at you. In the professional game, a lot higher paced, especially if you're playing higher up on the pitch, you're going to be defending almost from a back press and from behind. So I'm curious what her abilities are in that regard, because she hasn't really had to do it in college, in my opinion.
And once you peel back the layers of the onion, this is what we've all seen for people who are following Velocity FC, is what type of cover is provided by the center backs. How does the pivot or the double pivot factor in when the fullbacks need help? We've seen this happen time and time again so far with Velocity FC. Let's move on. Sarah Clark, 25-year-old, 5'6" defender. Sarah was born in Durham, North Carolina, but grew up in Brighton, Michigan. Her uncle Mike played professionally for Columbus Crew. He didn't just play for Columbus Crew. He had 200 some odd appearances, was an MLS All-Star in 2000, and started for the 2002 Columbus Crew team that won the U.S. Open Cup 1-0 over LA Galaxy. So some pedigree in this family. My goodness, didn't know any of that. She played her ECNL soccer for a team called the Michigan Hawks, where they won back-to-back national titles in 2016 and 2017. She played 2 years for her mom and dad's alma mater, Bill and Lori, shout out, Purdue University, was named to the Big Ten All-Freshman team. She made 36 appearances, scored 3 goals, and had 7 assists and 3,000 minutes for Purdue before transferring for her final year. I think this is going to happen repeatedly. It's like it might have been a COVID thing for University of Virginia, where she made 61 appearances, had 5 assists and 2,300 minutes for Virginia. Let's talk about a professional experience. Abby, what do you have on Sarah Clark?
I'm also glad that we got her like family tree. Professionalism in the blood. So Sarah is an interesting one. She was undrafted, but got into a North Carolina preseason, then went on to sign a national team replacement contract in 2023 before going on to play in Australia for Canberra. If I pronounce that incorrectly, Sydney, you can DM me later, in the A-League. And so I do think that they actually played against each other, to be honest. So
Probably, yeah.
She's had an unorthodox, but also kind of how everybody else in this roster has found their way to this team, kind of, trickle through the NWSL, find another team overseas, get some really solid minutes. That's what I noticed about her pedigree, is that she has solid minutes as a center back, and you can't say that for everyone.
Talk to me about what you saw in the tape of her playing, because I didn't see any examples of her playing center back in the stuff that I was able to see, but maybe she did professionally?
No, what I saw in her film was less about position, more about her defending mechanics. And the only reason why I have any legitimacy in terms of speaking about defending mechanics is because Sydney has berated them into my head.
Yeah.
And those small details go a long way on the professional game, which way you're facing in terms of where the ball is on the pitch, footwork, dropping back, not crossing your feet or doing so. All of these little details in her highlight tape. And again, you pick the best, of course. I saw a lot of proficiency in her mechanics.
I saw the same thing, and it stuck out pretty much immediately. She just looked super comfortable and aggressive. Her positioning as a defender, I liked how she closed down on attackers. I liked her stance as a 1v1 defender. She just looked comfortable, compact, balanced. She'll be very tough to beat. That's one thing that stuck out to me, is whether she's in a back three or she's playing fullback. She's going to be I think she'll be one of the more solid defenders on this team. Probably one of the better crossers of the ball too, from what I saw, on this team, from the players that have been signed so far. We haven't talked about the forwards yet, but as far as defenders and midfielders go, she looked like one of the more competent crossers of the ball. She did take some set pieces as a college player. I don't know if that continued for her as a pro. I think it might have. I think in her A-League tape, I saw some examples of her taking set pieces. Position and role, I just kind of hinted at it a little bit. What do you expect from Sarah Clark, Abby?
Well, if the first thing on the list you talk about is her crossing proficiency, I think you would assume that she's an outside back. But for me, her defending mechanics really set her in the center back position. I think she's experienced. I put it this way: I'm a center back. Sydney will kill me for this. Center back, you're either very smart or very fast. And I think she has a little bit of both, but I think she's very smart. And I would like to see that profile in a center back role.
I saw the pace you're talking about too. It's funny that the very front title card of her YouTube highlights says she's a 2 or 3. So I thought that was interesting. But that was when she was a college player. Maybe now that she's played for in the A-League, maybe she's changed her mind on that. We'll see. Let's move on. Alyssa. Now I'm going to pronounce this the way that this word is supposed to be pronounced. Bourgeois. Alyssa Bourgeois, 5'3", 22-year-old fullback. She grew up in Maynard, Massachusetts. She will be familiar to my friend Abby Carchio because they both played for the vaunted NEFC, New England. What does that stand for? New England Football
Club.
Football Club, thank you. Just like Abby, she was a top drawer soccer top 150 player. Started her college experience for Boston University, where she only made 5 appearances, but that was because her time at Boston University was cut short by COVID. She then transferred to Santa Clara in 2021, where she made 52 appearances, scored a goal, had 6 assists in 3,100 minutes of play, and was a 2023 All WCC Honorable Mention player. Okay, what happened to Alyssa since then? / give me the goods, because you played for the same youth club.
Yes, so briefly, for her professional career, like some of the other players on this roster, was drafted in the 2024 NWSL draft, 4th round to Houston Dash. Did not sign / didn't get minutes, but doesn't even matter for me because we shared the red and blue of NEFC. I also know I know one of her coaches that had coached her at BU for a brief amount of time. And then also I do know coaches that have been around her through NEFC and have definitely inquired about her. And they all have one consistent thread to say, is that she is lights out speedy. As we say in Massachusetts, wicked fast.
Wicked fast, okay. Unfortunately, this is what I was really sad. She's another one of those players I really wish I could see more tape. Unfortunately, her only video on YouTube is from her very brief time at BU. So I see a very good athlete. I see a very fast runner. but that's all I see. I see some athleticism, and she plays the sport of soccer. That's about all I could tell from her 5 games that she played for Boston University. She did play against my beloved Gonzaga last October. I did get a chance to see her play, but I'm going to be honest with you. I was much more focused on how Gonzaga was doing and how 2 of her teammates, Sally Menti and Lucy Mitchell, both of whom are coming back to play for Santa Clara as seniors, thanks to COVID. They were terrifying that day. So I had to go back and look at some videos I recorded with my cell phone of the game of Santa Clara when they came to Gonzaga and lost 1-0 to Gonzaga, I might add. Anyway, let's talk about her role and what position we think she's going to play, Abby.
Yeah, so I do have one more tidbit of information that I siphoned off from some of my connects. She is a fantastic dribbler of the ball, which to a coach can be a really good thing in the back line or can be a really annoying thing in the back line. But from what I hear, she's very proficient at that. So a combination of speed and a solid dribbler, I would definitely peg her as an outside back. Whether that's on the left or the right, I don't know, but probably I believe she is right-footed, so would be starting on the right side.
I think I found a Houston Dash supporters website where somebody had broken down all the players that were signed in the 2024 draft, and whoever wrote this article noted her speed and her crossing ability both. So we shall see. That's what we have for Alyssa Bourgeois. Next up, Haley Thomas, 5'8", 25-year-old center back, grew up in our very own state of Washington in Kennewick. Her amateur experience included being a youth player for Three Rivers Soccer Club. She played at Weber State for 3 seasons before COVID struck, where she had 58 appearances, all of them starts. That's going to be a familiar theme with Haley Thomas. 2 goals and 2 assists in 5,400 minutes. She was a 2019 and 2020 first team All Big Sky player and was a 2020 Big Sky co-defensive MVP. She then transferred to Boston College for her senior year, where she made 18 appearances, all of them starts, and had 2 assists in 1,500 minutes. Her 7,000 minutes as a college soccer player showed some clear durability. I have a note here. It's a platitude, but it's accurate. The best ability sometimes is availability. All right. Talk to me about Haley Thomas as a professional and what you think of her as a player, Abby.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Benji, because I think you have a stark contrast for her professional career. She went on to play 2 years in Iceland for a club called IBV, where she only made 11 appearances.
Mm-hmm.
I find that to be a bit odd. Not sure. I'm assuming there's some injuries fluttered in there. But again, very odd. She then went on to play in Germany for the Bundesliga for a club called Duisburg. Good experience there. But overall, a bit of question mark in terms of her playing history.
Yeah, as a professional, for sure. Yeah, she had 11 games. 10 of them were starts for Duisburg, and she did play the full 90 and all those starts. So one thing about this kid is if she starts a game, she's most likely going to finish it. It's nuts. Her minutes are insane. She's clearly a very durable player.
I think it would be more of a warning sign if a center back or someone that's pegged as a center back wasn't getting, close to 90 minutes every game anyways.
Yeah.
But it is great that she does show that durability. I do think that both Iceland and the Bundesliga are very physical leagues. She's not going to be afraid to get a few bruises, as I know from my time in Iceland. And so aside from that, though, Benji, I'm not too sure what I'm going to see from her on the professional scene.
Yeah, position and role, it seems kind of obvious. She's only ever played center back. And yeah, any other thoughts on Haley Thomas? Kind of a wait-and-see player for me.
100% wait-and-see player. I think this is one of the few players that I would say only has one position, which is, I'm curious how that'll pan out for her in the depth charts.
Okay, great segue, because I would have thought the same for the next and our last player we're going to talk about. It's our friend Sydney Ann Cummings, 5'10", 25-year-old center back who grew up in Millstone Township, New Jersey. Mom and dad, Lori and Gavin. Gavin's from Guyana. That's a country next to Venezuela and Suriname in South America. Look it up. She is a dual citizen because of that. She, as an amateur, played for FC Copa Academy. She spent 3 years with Abby Carchio, my co-host today at Brown University, where she made 52 appearances, all of them starts. scored 2 goals and had 8 assists in 4,800 minutes. She was second team All Ivy as a freshman and sophomore. She was a team captain, first team All Ivy, first team All Region, second team All American as a junior. She then transferred to Georgetown for her senior year after COVID. Georgetown, ironically, the capital of Guyana. Thought that was interesting. She played 22 games for Georgetown University as a Hoya, started all of them, scored 5 goals in 2,100 minutes, and was named Big East Defensive Player of the Year. She also has had at least 5, Wikipedia says 5 plus, I don't know what the hell that means, appearances, and has scored 4 goals for the Guyanese national team as an international player, where what that included the 2018 and 2022 CONCACAF World Cup qualifiers. She was named to the best 11 of the 2022 CONCACAF qualifiers team. Not easy for you to do, I'm sure, but let's talk about Sydney Ann Cummings, our friend. And what about her professional experience? I think you know a little bit about it.
Oh my gosh, I don't even know what I can say and can't say. But first off, shout out to Mr. and Mrs. Cummings. You guys are the best. So her professional career. Sydney gets drafted to Louisville, 4th round draft pick. Very exciting day. I remember being on the phone with her after that. Well deserved. Ended up not signing a contract there. We've talked about that a lot on our podcast. Mm-hmm. But she goes on to sign a national team replacement contract with San Diego Wave. Amazing experience for her, training with the likes of Alex Morgan, getting coached by Casey Stoney, who was a formidable center back herself. She then goes over to Australia and plays for Western United, gets amazing minutes there, star of the show over there before coming home for a little bit, going back with San Diego, then signing with a big club called Celtic. Didn't get the time she wanted over there, but this is why she's at Zephyr, to get some minutes and to show what she can do.
Yep. Have to add, in 20 appearances, scored 4 goals for Western United in the A-League in Australia. So shout out. Look, I'm just going to be totally honest with you. Sydney is a massive effing get for the club, period. She is a set piece menace, first and foremost. My favorite of her goals was one against St. John's in the Big East Conference Championship. I forget what year it was, when she absolutely murders the back post defender after crashing the box and scoring from a corner. It was the funniest thing. Not only did she score the goal, but then she just absolutely kills this kid who was trying to be a back post defender. Didn't go well for that defender. She times her tackles very well. She is not reckless. She's going to win aerial duels, as if that's not obvious, as a 5'10" player. Abby mentioned how Sydney will make you feel her as a defender when we talked on our last podcast when they were teammates at Brown. That is what I see repeatedly. She will body you. She will use her strength like a basketball player boxing out. Same principles apply. There's a lot about basketball and soccer that are shared. And Sydney's the type of player that will make you feel her as a defender. And when she does close down space on an attacking player and does make that contact, it typically rocks that attacking player, and she's going to get the ball. If I'm a goalkeeper, I'm just stoked to know that she's there. As a goal line defender, as somebody who's going to win those duels. Her record of assists shows that she's also capable of joining the attack as more than just a set piece threat. There was one moment where she was like headed for the end line, whips in across. I was like, whoa. That was with her Georgetown time. She's also really good at the big switches, the kind of Joachim Andersen, if you know, kind of long distribution passes. She'll probably take set pieces from deep possessions in the defensive third. Reminds me a bit, for followers of the podcast, of a player for Gonzaga last year, Grace Corder, who's a 5'11" center back who just transferred to Boston College. Ugh. Anyway, yeah, I mean, Sydney is just obviously nailed on as a center back, in my view. I know it's probably not easy for you to talk about that, Abby, but did I miss anything? You mentioned that Haley seems like she's one position player. What else can our friend Sydney do? Got a little 6 in her? Like, what else can she do?
Sydney has played in the midfield for her women's league that she plays at home. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but she has played both the 6, 8, and also the 10. Not at an incredibly high level, but for fun, she definitely pushes up in the midfield.
All those techers that you helped her with at Brown University?
Yeah, let's not forget about that, all
No,
the
we
listeners. In seriousness, like Sid could play a 6, but she's a true center back. It would be a waste if she was anywhere else on the pitch. Just in terms of her build and her height, I think that's something that's going to be relevant in this league. I will say, you mentioned her long distribution, which in college she was definitely known for and is still known for. She can hit these 40-yard long balls. And she's also developed her left foot as well, so she can hit both sides of the pitch. But what she's really developed over the last couple of years in the professional game is her short range passing and how integral that is for a ball playing back line. I think she's added that to her game. I think that's going to be major in this season.
I feel like I saw a little bit of that in the Georgetown video and maybe even in the Western United stuff. So that's a great shout. Abby, I can't believe it, but we did it. I'm going to jump to the end of this because we have to then regroup for part 2 of this podcast, where we're going to talk about forwards. We're going to talk a little bit of speculation. We might throw together what we think a 4-3-3 could look like. We did it. All 14 of the midfielders and defenders who've been signed so far by Zephyr FC, 8 midfielders, 6 defenders. Anyway, next up, forwards and goalkeepers. I hope to have Joe Johnson on the podcast. I think that's going to happen later this week. We'll have that in time for next week. And then that'll give Abby and I a chance to talk about what we expect to see. There will be several episodes of the Super League Soccer Show Takeover in the coming weeks, so hold on tight. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and, of course, rate and review on Spotify and Apple. Thank you for listening, everyone. Thank you, Abby.
What a pleasure.